the word risk, most people immediately think about losing money in the market, or do they think about risking their money in a silly investment or, at the roulette table? Welcome into our show, Retirement Compass Radio Show. I've got Jeff Gove here from Stonebridge Wealth Systems. Mr. Gove, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Jackie?
Oh, I'm doing well.
Good.
But that risky behavior stuff, there's a lot of risks we take. The older we get, I think we'd like to take less risks, don't you think?
Yeah, and it depends on what type of risks you're talking about. Hopefully we're still being adventurous, right?
Right.
Maybe going to Colorado and whitewater rafting or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we still want to take some risks. But, when we're talking about our finances, there's different types of risk. If you're putting money in the bank, a lot of people think, it's safe. I'm not going to lose any money. I've got FDIC insurance, which all of that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But what we don't think about is the risk of inflation. Every day that money sits there and isn't earning enough to cover inflation, you're losing money safely is essentially what you're doing. There are other options available to you that are still on the safe side, but that give you more growth potential, growth opportunity. So that is a risk that a lot of people don't think about. Putting the money in a CD, now we have some tax risk because that CD income, that income that's coming off the CD, even if you're not taking that income, you're still paying income tax on that. So, which could impact how your Social Security is taxed, could impact long-term capital gains. There's a lot of other things that income off those CDs or the money markets could impact. So we have to be careful with that too.
Sure. That's really a good point. That's a good thing that you have the Retirement Compass because it covers all points.
Right. And that's why we designed it because, and we talk about this all the time, it doesn't matter how much you make. What matters is how much of what you make you get to keep, right? How much of that money do we keep in your pocket? Because if you earn, let's say that CD is paying you 4%, but you're paying income tax on that at 22%, if you're in the 22% bracket, and let's say that drags over some of your Social Security dollars, now you're paying 22% on 85% of your Social Security. Maybe that drags in some long-term capital gains where you weren't paying. Now you are paying 15% plus state on top of that. So the taxes can get really expensive. If you just looked at from a safety perspective, I want to put this, $500,000 in CDs because I'm not going to lose anything. I'm going to make something. By the time you look at the tax impact, that return could be essentially cut in half.
Oh, dear.
And when we see, so let's say your 4% is now 2%, and let's say inflation is 3.5%, again, you're losing money even though you have it in a safe place.
Now, this is interesting that you mentioned that. We think it's a safe place, but I guess that people think that I want to be safe no matter what because everything else feels risky. Potentially, if you're a novice like I was before I started working with the Stonebridge Fellows, that a retirement plan meant investing in stocks and bonds. Is that an oversimplification?
It is. I mean, but that's where a lot of people are at. For over the years, you've probably put money in a 401k or an IRA or maybe a SEP, something like that. And the options were, if you go to work every day and, when you started, they said, do you want to sign up for the 401k? You said yes. They say, okay, fill out this paperwork. Here's a list of the funds that you get to choose from. And by the way, you have to make the decision. So you're now an investment professional. So you can do the research and figure out, where you park your money.
Right.
But it's mutual fund based. So you put your money in this one fund or, a group of funds, and then it just grows over the years. So that's kind of what you're used to. But once you retire or even outside of those 401ks, there are a lot of other options. Here we use structured notes. We do use mutual funds, ETFs, individual stocks, bonds. There's so many different things you can invest your money in that provide different benefits. So if you're risk averse, you don't want to take a lot of risk, there are options for you where you can earn a pretty good return without just investing in bonds.
Okay.
Bonds are an option, but what we saw a couple of years ago when interest rates were going up, bond values will come down as interest rates go up. So the risk exposure, you thought you were taking less risk, but I think the S&P 500, this was 2022, was down 17% or in that ballpark. Bonds were down about 13% over that same year. So, that's what we thought was safe money really wasn't as safe as we thought it was because we still lost value.
Wow.
But there are other options available to you.
Good. This is good to know. The phone number to call Stonebridge Well Systems, 866-295-5146. It's 866-295-5146. Regardless of where you reside, you're hearing our radio show or our podcast or our YouTube channel, and you're having a view there. That's fine. It's Stonebridge Well Systems on YouTube. And anywhere you get your programming, podcast form, it's called The Retirement Compass on Spotify and Apple, The Retirement Compass. But again, on the phone number, 866-295-5146 for easy contact with the team so you can have somebody looking at these things for you. Sometimes when we want to go to safety, it feels like the returns of something that's super safe is not helping tread water like we thought, which you already mentioned. You're losing money safely. So has there been a resurgence in this lately? Have you found in new clients? Certainly not existing clients, though.
Yeah, there. Like I said, there are other opportunities.
Okay.
Interest rates had increased over the last few years.
Oh, good.
They're probably going to be pulling back a little bit. They've cut rates over the last year a little bit. Remains to be seen what they'll do this fall, if any other rate cuts will be coming. But there are a lot of options. It wasn't long ago where when you went to the bank, a CD was paying 1% or 2%. So it definitely didn't make sense. Some of these conversations that we're having now, we weren't having then because nobody wanted to go to the bank for 1% and tie their money up for
Right.
6 months or a year. Well, now where interest rates are higher, a lot of people have gone back to the bank where, we can get that safe return. But like I said, if you don't account for the tax impact or inflation, you could have some problems there.
Sure.
A lot of times when people come in, we ask them to bring in their tax return with them. And we can see, on their 1040, where that interest is coming from and have an idea of, okay, you've got a bunch of money in CDs. Here's the impact of that because over here is your Social Security amount that you're receiving. And then if you look to the right, that's how much you're paying tax on. And for some people, if we just cut that interest, not saying we don't want your money to grow, but let's have it grow differently in a different way so it doesn't drag that Social Security over to become taxed. Some examples would be instead of investing in something that's paying income that you don't need, invest in something that's going to appreciate, so an appreciating asset. So if you put $100,000 in this ETF, for example, and the shares of that ETF grow in value, you don't pay tax on that until you sell it. If it's less than a year, you pay short-term capital gains. If it's over a year, you pay long-term capital gains, which there's tax benefits to that. But then it's a choice. I'm going to pay tax if I decide to. And by deciding to, I'm talking about I'm selling this fund. I'm going to invest it in something else. Or I'm going to spend the money on something. But like I said, it's a choice. So we're choosing to pay the tax or to not. The other nice thing about that is if you pass away, if this is money you're leaving to your kids, they get a step up in cost basis when you pass away. So they don't have to pay the long-term capital gains on that fund that you bought.
Oh, terrific.
So what you're paying tax on, as interest, there's a way where you could shift that over and maybe never pay the tax if you don't ever need the money.
Oh, hey. Now that sounds optimistic, and I have an enthusiastic whoopee for that. 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146. And this is important, so important right now because retirement doesn't just last 10 years. I mean, we're talking 25, 30, 35 years. So to manage this money properly requires a look at all the points on the compass, Jeff.
Yeah, and I'm talking a lot about taxes right now, but this is where the legacy planning comes in as well. Because again, if you structure it correctly, you don't have to pay the tax on the gains, and your kids don't have to pay the tax on the gains.
Hey.
So we cut that out, and then we look at IRAs. How do we get that to the next generation? As tax efficient as we can, because we know with those tax deferred accounts, taxes are going to be paid unless you leave it all to charity, which is an option. But taxes are going to be paid for most of us, whether you pay it when you take the money out or it goes to your kids and then they pay the tax on that. The problem with that is the time frame in which they have to take that money out has tightened.
Yes.
So instead of taking it out over their lifetime, now we have to take it out within 10 years. And your kids are probably in their highest income earning years when you start taking that money out. So, let's say your kid makes, they're married and they make $200,000 a year. You have $1 million in your 401k or IRA, and that goes to your one child who make $200,000 a year. Now they've got to take out a minimum of $100,000 a year. That's with no growth on that $1 million. If that's invested and
That
it's
could be,
growing,
yeah.
they're gonna have to take out more than that.
Yeah.
So they're gonna pay probably more tax than you would
Oh, golly.
on that money.
So it's weird to say that, but that could be burdensome. Here's the number, 866-295-5146. A windfall like that, 866-295-5146. And this is Retirement Compass Radio Show. I've got Jeff Gove here. Be right back.
Is your retirement being eaten up by financial termites like hidden fees, inflation, and avoidable taxes? Call today for a complimentary financial review so we can help you root out these retirement killers.
Okay, so for many retirees, I was thinking, Jeff Gove from Stonebridge Wealth Systems, one of the most emotional financial decisions isn't about the markets, but it's about the family. And when kids or loved ones need help, the instinct is to step in and help them out. But this could be placing risk upon their retirement plan. But how do you get through to someone who wants to make that decision? Do they call you first and say, hey, we want to give our kid 50 grand because he got laid off?
Yeah, I hope they call me first, and they don't just take the money out and, not knowing the tax consequences or what that looks like.
Oh.
But and I've had this conversation with some clients. Some of them are probably listening, and they know the conversation. At the end of the day, it's your money to do whatever you want with.
Of course. Oh, my
we
goodness.
all love our kids and we
Yeah.
want the best for them. But sometimes the best for them is letting them struggle a little bit. It's easy for me to say because my kids are all at home.
All
I'm
right.
not there yet.
Right.
So I don't know how I'll react if that day does come. But the nice thing about our financial planning software is, if you're going to give your kids some money, like I can plug that in to see how that's going to impact you before you actually take the money out. So we know what you're walking into. But we always want to make sure my job or your financial advisor's job is to make sure that you're okay. That's primary. Make sure you have the retirement of your dreams and that you're not ever going to get that call that says, you're out of money, you're going to have to go back to work. So we have honest conversations. We talk about, okay, you can do this, but here's the consequence of doing that. And maybe it's not giving money to kids. Maybe it's making a purchase or, buying a second home or buying a camper, buying a mobile home, whatever it is. It's different for everyone. But we can have that conversation. We can plug that into your plan before you actually make take that big step and take the money out and see what the results look like.
Great. Because there's so much to the planning process that can help. It's helpful to talk it out with someone else.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, it does make sense to give their kids money.
Sure.
Some clients we have that conversation with where, because you can give $19,000 this year per person, so if you're married, you can each give $19,000 to each of your children, their spouses, whoever you want, without having to report that. So
Is that cash money or can you do qualified money?
you can't do qualified money. You would have to cash that out, pay the tax on it, and then gift it.
Oh, well,
It's a
golly.
good question.
Right, golly.
But for a lot of people, it makes sense because let's help our kids while they need help. Maybe it's to pay off student loans. Maybe it's to put a down payment on a house. Maybe it's got one client that helped his two boys finish their basements. So
That's sweet.
doing some of those things, helping them, when they actually need the help. Because a lot of people, by the time you inherit money, you already have your own money. So you struggled through, which isn't a bad thing.
I've thought about that.
The struggle kind of makes you stronger. But by the time you receive this big pile of money, you have your own big pile of money and you don't really need it. So, it could make sense to do some gifting.
Sure. I want to shift the conversation to the estate planning, if you don't mind. First, the number. Here's how to reach Stonebridge Wealth Systems, 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146. Please call and hop on the schedule of whoever you want to meet with or how it meets with your needs. It's not a difficult conversation. It doesn't cost you a thing either. No cost, no obligation to meet and consult with Stonebridge, 866-295-5146. So here we are, a big, transfer of wealth, Jeff.
Yeah.
Right? The big wealth transfer. There's trillions of dollars in the gosh darn 401ks and IRAs of American baby boomers and some Gen Xers now too. And when we talk about that $1 trillion transferring, this is part of your retirement plan. It's part of the estate planning process, right? Mm-hmm. And it seems to me like some people might think it's more about documents than the discussion itself. Where do you start there? How do you consult with people on this?
Yeah, the documents are important, and we actually have a resource now where we can help you, or we can help facilitate drafting those documents.
Oh,
we
great.
work with some very qualified attorneys to get that done. So if you don't have a will or your estate plan done, reach out. We can help you get that done. But you're right; it is more than just the documents. That's kind of the final. We decided what we wanted to happen. Here's the documentation that says this is, what we decided.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is a lot of the planning can be done on the account level. So if you have bank accounts, by adding a beneficiary on your savings account, on your checking account, on your CD or money market, that avoids probate. So you don't need a will for that type of money as long as you have beneficiaries, your IRAs, your 401ks, life insurance. In some cases, even your house, you can name a beneficiary on your house. Call it TOD deed, transfer on death deed, where upon death, they go to the courthouse with your death certificate and they redeed the house and you're done. It avoids probate. So,
Ooh, and we do want that at all costs.
Yeah. So just having your affairs in order. I met with a gal this last week and, she was left a mess. There was accounts all over the place.
Oh.
It was trying to track down all the money. Her brother didn't have any children. So it was going to the siblings. But by the time it was all said and done, it was like, man, it's a lot of work to get this all wrapped up. And for what? There wasn't a lot of assets there, but
Had to be done.
still had to go through the process.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And having money all over the place, had 3 different financial advisors that we got to try to track down what do they actually have. You got old statements that say there's 25,000, but it was 3 or 4 years ago. Well, you got to try to see if that money's still there. It's just a lot of work. If you have your estate plan in order, you can save your beneficiaries a lot of time. And make it more of a blessing than a curse.
Sure. And we do want to transfer the money so that it is a blessing. And
Right.
there's a lot of money to be transferred. I don't know. We talk about it on the radio, and I don't mean to be glib about it, but for crying out loud, there's a lot of money that's going to be transferred.
Right. And there's a lot of people that are charitably inclined as well. So
Yes.
if you're going to leave money to charity, make sure you're leaving the right money to charity. You know, if you don't leave your life insurance to charity, because that goes to your kids tax free, leave some of your IRA money
Right.
to the charity because they don't have to pay tax on it and your kids would.
Right.
Some of those little things can save you thousands of dollars.
Yes.
Whether that's just in the probate expense by getting it done right, the taxes that could be avoided potentially if it's done right. Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes sense to have a plan. And that's why we developed the retirement compass, because it starts with you, right? We start with the income plan. How do we make sure you're okay? Then we look at the investment plan. How do we invest your money to make sure that you're okay? And then we look at the tax plan to make sure, okay, we're not paying any more in taxes than we have to. You're going to pay taxes for most of us, but let's not overpay. Then healthcare, because that could be one of your biggest costs in retirement. If you go to a nursing home, you know, talk to people, they're paying $14,000 a month for a nursing home right now. And in some cases, not getting great care. You know, they have to be there full time, just
Right.
about, and they're paying that much money. So have a plan for that. And then the last one is legacy plan, making sure that all of these different points of the compass fit together is really, really important.
I like that you mentioned the healthcare part of it, not just long-term care, for heaven's sakes, but just healthcare. If somebody does have, what do you call it, a chronic health incident or an emergent, I don't know.
Well, and it could be simple things like dental. You know, Medicare doesn't cover dental. So I've got a client, they're doing getting new teeth. You know, $41,000.
Oh, golly.
So dental insurance isn't covering that.
No.
Medicare's not covering that. Something they want to do, and it's 40 grand. So, yeah, I mean, that's okay, but let's plug that in as a goal that we want to get that done.
All right, 866-295-5146. Now, in our next segment, oh my gosh, I thought, you know, this whole discussion on the wealth transfer was done, but I just thought of another couple items. So is that okay if we hit those next?
Yes.
Jeff Gove?
Let's do it.
All
Yep.
right, again on the phone number, 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146. Be right back.
As Americans, we strive for better. From a better house to a better career to a better life for our children and grandchildren. Better has become the American way. When it comes to your retirement, what does better mean to you? Does it mean more income, a flexible lifestyle, better solutions? A better retirement begins with a financial plan. To get your complimentary written financial plan, call the number you see here. You only retire once. This is your opportunity to plan for better.
I know that it's still planting season, but maybe we can plant the seeds to get folks to come in and talk to you once the seeds are laid, to talk about maybe a succession plan for our farmers and our agricultural people. Because so many of them are turned 65, 67, 70, and want to retire eventually, Mr. Gove.
Yeah, and we work with a lot of those farmers. You know, if you have a few years before you're ready to step out, you know, we're able to put together a really good plan to help you pay as little tax as possible. Because, you know, some of the things that farmers are facing, you know, our listeners fully understand this, is
Of course.
the expenses. You know, maybe you've been you know, prepaying some expenses to cut income for the prior year, or, you know, pushing grain into the next year just to try to keep your taxes low. And then you get to that last year of farming where you don't have any expenses because you're not farming. And you've pushed this grain or all of this income into that year. And then on top of that, now we have machinery that we're going to be selling. And
So lots of
when
income.
when they sell this machinery, they're going to pay income tax on it. So this stuff has been depreciated out, and when they recapture that, they're going to pay income tax on it. So, yeah, it's could get very, very expensive. But if you have a little bit of time, there are things that you can do to try to smooth out the transition instead of just getting hammered for a couple years. where we can smooth this out over time so you can pay less taxes, be in a lower tax bracket
I see.
on that money. Yeah, there are options available to you, but we have to have time. That's the key.
Okay, right. It can't be if you're going to retire next year because then you're sitting on all these assets.
Yeah, I mean, there's still things that can be done, but you're very, very limited.
Okay.
You know, if you're, within that 3-year period, if you're 2 years out, it's going to be harder to minimize the tax implications.
Sure. And the number for Stonebridge, so you can get some of this strategy under your belt, 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146. I have never met anyone, a farmer or a rancher, who retires and then just leaves the thing behind. It's usually that they pass things on to the son or the daughter or whoever, and then they continue on helping because they have the knowledge.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, a lot of times that's how it goes. And maybe even if they don't pass it on to their kids, they have, the neighbor kid that is trying to get going farming. So they rent the farm ground to the neighbor.
Okay. There
Or
you
something
go.
like that. But you're right. There's a lot of farming families still out there where to get into farming as a young person starting out, I think is nearly impossible.
Is it?
If you had to go buy machinery,
Oh.
buy land, you just can't cash flow that. So,
Wow.
for the farming family where, we've got the machinery, we've got the ground, that's really beneficial. For any of our listeners that are looking at getting out of farming and maybe you don't have kids or it's not that legacy ground where it's come down through the generations and we want to keep this in the family forever. I totally get that. For the ones that are just worried about, the long-term capital gains that they would have to pay, the
Okay.
taxes they would have to pay if they sold that ground, there are options available to you. We help people a lot doing 1031 exchanges.
Okay.
Which is selling real estate and going and buying another type of real estate.
Oh, okay.
And yields typically, a net yield on farm ground is going to be around 1% right now, just because the prices of that ground are so inflated. And crop prices are down. So a farmer that's renting your ground, they can't afford to pay you what that ground is worth and giving you a 5% yield. So your yield is going to be around 1%, between 1 and 2 typically. If you're getting over 2, you're doing great. There's other options available where you could get in that 4 to 5% range and not have to do anything. It's nothing that you have to manage or anything like that. So
Okay.
if that's you, give us a call. We'd be happy to walk through some options for you.
Terrific. And here's the phone number, 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146.
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. After nearly a lifetime on the job, you should be rewarded for all the time you spent working. Whether that's crossing off items on your bucket list, learning a new passion, or rekindling the love of an old one. After all, life isn't over when you stop working. It's the start of an all-new chapter. The one where you're the writer and you get to choose how your story will go. A way to achieve that is by having a clear financial plan to sustain your golden years. The biggest fear most retirees have is if they'll have enough money to maintain the lifestyle they've always enjoyed. Having a plan to help protect you against the curveballs life often throws will help to maintain your lifestyle. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
It's not just about walking away from work in retirement. It's about stepping into what comes next. Welcome back to our show, Retirement Compass Radio Show with Stonebridge Wealth Systems, and I've got Jeff Gove here. Mr. Gove, are people unretiring themselves? Is that just a lack of planning?
Well, hopefully, if you're unretiring yourself, it's because you are choosing to.
Okay.
But I know, I mean, I haven't met with a lot of them, but you know that there are people going back to work because they have to.
Yes.
I can remember one specifically. This was a few years ago, but I think I've talked about him on the show before. But came in on a Thursday, said, I'm retiring on Tuesday. He had already filed for Social Security at 62.
Oh, golly.
His Social Security was going to be about $1,500 a month. Their expenses are about $5,000 a month.
Oh, my golly.
So the math wasn't mathing.
No.
So that was an instance where he did end up retiring from that job, but he is still working.
Okay.
So that's kind of an unfortunate situation. They hadn't saved well. They didn't have money saved for retirement. So if he had done that, if he had stuck with his plan, he essentially would have had to work forever, because once you start drawing Social Security, it's locked in. Your $1,500 a month is going to be $1,500 plus annual cost of living adjustments. You're never getting a big raise, or in his case, he wouldn't. So that would be a lifetime mistake that he made. But hopefully, like I said, people that are going back to work, what I see a lot is, maybe we're going to volunteer, or, I want the job where I go to work part-time from noon to 4, let's say.
Woohoo.
And then I go home, and I'm not taking work with me. I'm not thinking about work before work or after work. I go check people out at Ace Hardware, True Value, whatever that is for you. And then I'm done. Like that, for a lot of people, is the dream.
It's a beautiful dream, too. Isn't it Tim's Pop, who used to, was in the car business, right?
Yep, he was the transport guy.
I loved that. I want to do that. Because then you get to start a different car every time. Oh, boy.
Well, and you get to visit with people.
Sure. Use
it's good for your soul to be around people. So taking people back to work, when they drop their car off or whatever.
Fun.
Just being the runner. Yeah. I think he really enjoyed that.
That sounds like a fun job to me. All right. Here's the number for Stonebridge Well Systems, 866-295-5146. If any of this is ringing a bell in your brain, oh, man, I got to talk to someone about this. This is your team, 866-295-5146. All right. What about, we've climbed the corporate ladder. Now we're on the other side of it, right? We're on the other side of the wall. There has to be some conversations that most families need to have. We already talked about the legacy plan. What about the talk about what if somebody needs long-term care?
Yeah. It's definitely something you have to consider, because if you're a married couple, odds are one of you will need care, and odds are it's going to be the female that needs care, because women live longer than men typically. Guys, we end up just dying. When we get ill, we just die. Women just live longer. So it is something that every family should figure out. That doesn't mean everybody should buy insurance. It does not mean everybody needs insurance. If you were in the military, maybe you have VA benefits. If you haven't saved well, or you don't have a lot of money saved, Medicaid is an option. That it's not a great option. You have to consider it is welfare, so that's the type of situation you're walking into. But for some people, well, for anyone, I don't want them to sacrifice their retirement, the fun years, to pay for something that they may or may not
use.
Ever need.
Well, then what's the solution? Is there a hybrid leverage situation out there?
Yeah, there are. So typically today, what we're looking at, if we're looking at a long-term care plan, is we're looking at life insurance with long-term care. So if you think of, having a bucket of money, and let's say there's $500,000 in this bucket. If you die, it goes to your beneficiaries income tax-free.
Oh.
If you need it for your care, there's a spigot on the side of this bucket that you can turn on, and some of this money will come out to pay for your care. So that could be home health care, assisted living, nursing home, lots of options there.
Good.
And it doesn't matter who is providing the care. So it could even be your spouse if you lose 2 activities of daily living. So let's say you can't bathe yourself or feed yourself. You qualify. If a physician says that you can't do that, it's not just
I say
I decided I don't want to. It's you can't do it. But then you'd be able to turn that on, it does reduce that death benefit, obviously, by what you take out. But
It's still
the nice
there,
thing
and
about that,
you may never need it.
right? If you don't ever need it, then you still got value. I guess is the bottom line.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the bucket. So the bucket strategy is still alive and well, right? Not that it ever went anywhere, but can we talk about the bucket strategy that you suggest?
Yeah, there's two different bucket strategies that I want to talk about.
All
The
right.
first one is when we're looking at your income plan, and kind of where your money is parked. So we have the safety bucket. That's the money, that's your emergency fund. So the money that's in the bank, furnace goes out, you need to have quick access to that money. That's the safety bucket. Then we have the income bucket. This income bucket, we're putting enough money in there to give you the income that you need. So if your income need is $5,000, Social Security is $3,000, we need $2,000 a month to meet our budget. So we put enough money in that bucket to give us a guaranteed for the rest of your life, if you're married for both of your lives, that $2,000 a month. That's what we put in there. Then we have the growth bucket. That growth bucket, we put in the rest. The rest of your money goes there. We're just trying to grow that money. The reason this is really important and what it does for you is it allows you to retire with confidence. It gives you that license to spend. We want you to spend your money. So when the market, the month of March this year, the market was pretty volatile, with the whole
was.
deal with Iran and
Yeah.
everything. So people that have this plan set up, you're not worried about it because the stock market isn't going to send you back to work, because that $2,000 a month that you were getting, that's coming in whether the market is doing really well or it's doing really poorly. If that account gets depleted, so if it goes to zero because you've taken out your $2,000 a month forever and there was no growth, let's say it just drained that bucket, you're still getting that $2,000 a month, even after that account is worth zero. So it's insuring your income. But again, it allows us to invest that growth bucket with confidence. So we're not taking money out of it when the market's going down.
Right.
So we could be little bit more aggressive with that bucket. So that's the first bucket approach that
Okay.
when we look at income is really, really important. And again, it allows you to sleep well at night. The next one I want to talk about is the tax buckets. So there's three different tax buckets. We have the taxable bucket, which in that taxable bucket, we're talking about money market accounts, CDs, savings, a brokerage account, any of those accounts that are sending you the 1099 every year that you made interest. That's in that taxable bucket. Then we have the middle bucket, which is tax deferred. So in the tax deferred bucket, it's going to be 401k, 403b, IRAs,
Right.
annuities, non-qualified annuities, things where most of these, when you put the money in, you deducted it from your tax return. So it's going to grow tax deferred, and deferred means later, right? So
Yes.
it's not tax free. You're going to pay it later. So that's the middle bucket. The last bucket, and what I think is the best bucket, is the tax-free bucket.
Oh, hey.
So that's your Roth IRA, your Roth 401k. It could be life insurance. That's in that tax-free bucket. So the reason this is important when we look at your tax plan is if you've got all of your money, and we see this a lot, in that middle bucket, that tax-deferred bucket.
Right.
We call this the ticking tax time bomb.
All right.
Because you're going to pay taxes on that money when it comes out, or your kids will pay tax on the money when they take it out.
Right. And it's an imbalance.
Right. Yeah. So we can help you put together a strategy of getting that money out of that tax deferred bucket into that more efficient tax free bucket at a known tax rate. So you will pay tax when you put it in that bucket. But we've got a report that we can put together for you. It's called the Legacy Done Right report.
Yes.
And we'll look at, I guess, a starting point. Starting point would be go to stonebridgetaxbill.com.
All right.
Put your information in there. It'll tell you what the tax implications for your tax deferred accounts are over your lifetime. So that's step number one. Step number two is we put together this Legacy Done Right report. It's going to look at what does your legacy look like if you leave the money in the IRA? What does it look like if you just do a conversion at a known rate of return? Let's say we plug in 7%. And then is there a third option using life insurance? If this money is going to go to your kids, we could get all of the return up front. So I had an example with Elisa yesterday that she was working on where this couple has $20,000 in their Roth IRA, $700,000 in their IRA. So we're looking at taking $30,000 and do it per year and doing conversions. So I can either put that $30,000 in the Roth IRA and try to grow it, or I could use that $30,000, pay tax on it, just like you would with the conversion, use it to buy life insurance. That life insurance was about $1.2 million.
Oh, baby.
Also tax-free to the children, which they have one kid. So it was like age 87 before doing the Roth conversion would have equaled the life insurance option.
Oh my goodness.
So it's a way to get all of your return up front, because you get the death benefit, which is in essence for your kids, works the same as the Roth IRA, with one difference being the Roth IRA, they could allow to grow an additional 10 years after you're gone. The life insurance, it will not grow tax-free after you're gone. They just get a big pile of tax-free money. So
Good strategy there.
yeah.
Get your own good strategy from Stonebridge Wealth Systems. Use the 866-295-5146 number, 866-295-5146.
Did you ever think your retirement would be shared with our government? It's true. Your traditional 401k, IRA, pension, or similar retirement accounts are like a partnership with the IRS. Simply put, they want their tax dollars, and you have them. With our latest tax calculator, you can plug in your own numbers while sitting at home. To find out what your future tax liability could be, scan the QR code or go to stonebridgetaxbill.com.
As always, we like to wrap up the show with questions from those who are interested in having more details. So here we go. This is, by the way, Retirement Compass Radio Show with Stonebridge Wealth Systems. I've got Jeff Gove. I'm Jackie Selby. And in case you were listening on that last segment, Mr. Gove was talking about stonebridgetaxbill.com, stonebridgetaxbill.com. And then you could graduate into Legacy Done Right, and that's a report. So the two of those together are really good resources and a good starting point for you. And it's not behind a paywall or anything, stonebridgetaxbill.com. How about if a retiree has moved nearly 70% of the portfolio into cash and CDs because of recent volatility? Of course, an emotional reaction. Are they being prudent or creating long-term risk?
Well, if that's you, that would be really unfortunate, because the market came back pretty quickly, where the month of March was pretty volatile.
Yeah.
It was like, depending on what the news said, oil prices going up, created a lot of volatility, but it has come back really quickly. April's been pretty good. The problem with that, if depending on when you pulled that 70% out, well, now you're sitting on the sidelines and, your CDs or your money market or your cash, whatever you put that money into, that's not earning what the market's earning. So you lost money and then you cut off the ability to gain that money back. So your question was, are you being prudent or creating long-term risk? The long-term risk is really, okay, well, now what do you do? What do we do from here? We're sitting on the sidelines. The market has recovered from that, 1 month in the last 12 that it was down. What do we do now? How do you
get back in?
Right. Do we put the money all back in at once? Do we dollar cost average in, meaning, we just put in 10% over the next 10 months? What do we do from here? There's a lot of research that's been done, but it's all about time in the market. It's not trying to time the market. Because if you try to time the market and play these little volatility moves. And when you look at a chart, long-term chart, the month of March, the volatility that we saw is barely a blip on the radar. I know in the moment it doesn't feel that way. And that's part of our job. When we look at behavioral finance, I met with Elisa and one of her clients in March when this was happening, and they wanted to do exactly this. They wanted to pull the money out and put it all in a money market or in CDs. They're going to take it to the bank and buy CDs. And I sat down with them and walked through, it's counterintuitive, but the way we should be looking at this is actually the opposite. And what they ended up doing was the opposite. We actually took some of the money that was more conservative and we made their portfolio a little bit more aggressive. Because now if you have something that's down 10% and we can go and buy it, knowing it's still a good asset. We're not throwing money at something that we don't think is a good investment, but we're buying at a 10% discount. So those losses that we experienced, we're going to recover even quicker. And they just sent me an email just this last week and said, you know what, I thank you for talking us off the ledge.
Yes.
But this is, 4 or 5 weeks in a row of our clients get an email every Sunday that just says how their portfolio did over the last week.
Oh, nice.
So they've had 4 or 5 weeks of really solid gains that, they're like, okay, he was right. And it didn't have to go that way. The market could have continued to go down, but that's part of our job as financial advisors is to help you take emotion out of it. So we're not making these emotional decisions I can't take anymore. Even in a little blip on the radar that March was, I can't take anymore. I'm going to pull all my money out of the market and I'm going to bury it in the yard, or I'm going to put it in CDs, because you just locked in that loss and you can't recover. You can't recover, when you're sitting on the sidelines.
Right. That would be a real shame. 70% in the example that we're talking about, that's a lot of taxes.
Well, and there would be a tax efficient way to do that if you wanted to. Like if it was an IRA, you could take 70% out of the market and buy a CD that's in an IRA. The real problem, it could be a problem. You're right. You could have just created a bad tax situation for yourself where, instead of, for a 8% loss, you locked in that 8% loss and took, 22% tax rate on that. So, now you're down 30%. That could be the situation. But like the example that I was giving, there wouldn't have been any tax implications to that. But again, you're taking yourself, they're also drawing from their portfolio.
Oh.
So that is another thing to consider. Are we drawing from the portfolio? And they're probably drawing more than they should be to begin with. I told them, if you're taking out 7% and now you put it in a CD that's making 4%, well, you're losing money due to inflation and you're taking out more than you're earning. So just lots of problems with that.
Yes.
And they were open. It was just having a conversation and explaining.
Sure. It's as easy as that, right?
When you're talking about your own money,
Yeah.
it's easy to be emotional.
Sure.
So having someone that can walk you through and help you make good, educated decisions is really, really important.
I think it's good to have a middleman so that somebody who's not counting on that money for their retirement to make the decisions.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Somebody, if they're earning 5% on a CD, they feel comfortable staying there indefinitely. How do inflation and taxes factor into that decision if they're already in it and they've never gone any further than that?
A couple of things you need to look at. Is it 5% for the year and you have a 6-month CD, so you're only getting half of that? You have to know that. But on top of that, what are the tax implications? What is your other income? Because this interest on the CD, you're going to pay income tax on. So if you're in the 22% bracket, and depending on the state that you're in, you're going to pay 22% to the feds, and then whatever your state tax rate is on top of that. The other thing that we talked about earlier in the show was the impact on Social Security. So let's say that drags a little bit more of your Social Security over to become taxable. Up to 85% of your Social Security can be taxable, but it's based on what we call provisional income.
Oh,
So you add up half of your Social Security plus all of your other income, which an IRA distribution or CD income would count. So now we have more CD income that you're paying tax on that could drag some of that over. So your 5% that you think you're getting, you're not keeping, number one. And then to your point about inflation, let's say that 5% gets trimmed down by after tax to 3%. And let's say inflation's 3.5% or 4%. You're losing money safely by doing that. There are other solutions, and I talked about them earlier in the show, but putting it in something that will give you capital appreciation as opposed to income. And this isn't tax advice, this is investment conversation, but could help you reduce the tax liability on your Social Security, reduce the tax liability on long-term capital gains,
yeah.
and just on the CD income in general.
Now that sounds like good strategy. 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146. Even though I don't understand all of it, I think that people like me can pick up on the important parts. But in person, it's so much better. 866-295-5146. Get your consultation with Stonebridge. It doesn't cost you anything to bounce ideas off of them. It's 866-295-5146. What about somebody who wants to avoid market losses entirely, but they still need growth to support their 25-year retirement? I mean, that's all of us, right?
Yeah.
How do you balance these competing goals?
Yeah, so something to consider. There are investment options that are available to you that protect you from some market losses. An index annuity, for example, could be a good option for you. Depending on what else you have, it'd be something where we'd want to look at your whole strategy and all of your assets. But the way an index annuity works is, let's say you use the S&P 500 as the index that you're going to get your rate of return based on. If it goes up, you go up to a cap, let's say. So I think you can get a cap of 11, 12% right now. So if the market goes up, you make up to, let's say it's 12%. So you make 12%. The next year, market goes down 30%, you don't lose anything. So that's the trade-off. So market goes down, you stay even. Market goes up, you go up to that cap. Okay?
Okay.
So, if you were looking at avoid market losses entirely, that's a way to do that. Now, there's other risks here. There's liquidity risk because these annuities, pretty much any annuity is going to have what they call it a surrender schedule, meaning you have to keep your money there for a certain amount of time. Sometimes it's 5 years, 7 years, 10 years.
It's how you write it, though, right?
Yeah, right. Yep. Lots of options available.
Sure.
But if you take all of your money out at one time, you would pay a penalty. And there are circumstances where you can get to your money depending on the contract where in the event of death, there's not a penalty for your beneficiaries. If you go to a nursing home, they waive that surrender penalty. So there are circumstances where you can get to your money, but it's stuff you don't want to happen. But a lot of them are also written where you can get some of your money out without a penalty. So maybe it's 10%. 10% is pretty typical. Some are 5%, but where you can get in there and get 10% of your money every year without a penalty.
Sure. I mean, this is why people need to call you, because I think that there's a lot of misperceptions about what an annuity is. 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146. Stonebridge Wealth Systems bringing you Retirement Compass Radio Show.